Welcome to Arts Roll Call, a podcast showcasing artists and arts organizations, highlighting the role of the arts today in Greater Lansing. I'm Robin Miner-Swartz. I'm an editor, communications consultant, and a lifelong arts advocate. And today I'm talking with Ruelaine Stokes. Ruelaine is a writer, teacher, and arts organizer who brings poetry to life and people to poetry, both on the stage and in the classroom settings. Ruelaine is the current Lansing Poet Laureate, and she regularly gives readings and teaches workshops on poetry, creative writing, and the art of the spoken word. Her workshops include Finding Your Voice, Poetry as a Healing Art, and Creative Writing Strategies and Games. For many years, she taught English as a second language at Lansing Community College, Michigan State University, and in community ESL programs. Currently, she is president of the Lansing Poetry Club. Her most recent collection of poetry is Jar of Plenty, published in 2021, and along with former Lansing Poet Laureate Laura Apple, she co-edited My Secret Lansing, a 2023 collection of poetry and prose about the Greater Lansing area. Ruelaine, welcome to Arts Roll Call. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I'm excited to learn more about you because I have known you and known your career for a long time, but I love these opportunities to ask questions that I've just never asked you before. So this is a great forum for that. So let's start at the beginning. Has writing been something you've enjoyed doing even in your childhood?
Yes, yes. I was a voracious reader. Like every week, I would bring home a little stack of books from the library, and reading leads to writing. In fact, research shows that's true. Um, I read a book when I was maybe 10 or 11, and the heroine said she was going to be a writer. And I decided, okay, I'll be a writer. And after that, I've always felt that I was a writer at heart.
Oh, that's lovely. When did poetry become your passion? Can you talk a little bit about your life as a poet and your involvement in the Lansing Poetry Club and the Poetry Center?
I almost never became a poet because the very first poem I wrote, which was in early high school, was so dreadful that even I recognized it. I thought, that's just horrid, and I should never do this again. So I just never tried until I was in my early 30s and I went to a poetry reading, and there were three women, young women poets, and they were fabulous. They were just fascinating. And I was so compelled by what they were doing. I signed up for a poetry workshop, and that started a chain of events. And poetry has become one of the big passions of my life.
So did that interest then lead you to Lansing Poetry Club, or did you find one before the other?
I um, there was a long chain of events. I started relatively soon after joining the poetry workshop. I started reading poetry in public, and I was hanging out at the time with a sort of a big group of creatives who were trying everything and making movies and doing plays and writing scripts and creating poetry events, combining poetry and music. And I was just so excited by all of that that I started doing it too. And then in the late 80s, I started creating a monthly open mic at the old Hearthstone Bakery. And then eventually, when the bakery closed, we moved to Hobie's restaurant at Trowbridge. And then we moved to the Brick House in Old Town, and then to the Creole Gallery. So I was the organizer for a long time of poetry events at the Creole Gallery. So the Poetry Club has been relatively recent for me. I was elected president, and so we put on events there. Yeah.
And is that's different from the Poetry Center, is that right?
Yes, the
Okay.
Poetry Center, that's the RCAH, Center for Poetry at MSU. RCAH means the Residential College in Humanities, in Arts and Humanities.
Hmm.
And they have, and I'm not sure exactly when they were founded. It's the 2000s sometime.
Hmm.
But Anita Skeen, who's a fabulous poet and just a real force as an organizer, established the Poetry Center at MSU, and they bring in national, international poets, sometimes Michigan poets. They bring in really a wonderful, rich, diverse array of poetry for women. It's marvelous, and um, they're also in they're very, very open to, and one of their goals is to collaborate with and to engage the community with poetry. So there's been opportunities for collaboration, and that have been really exciting.
Well, and all these things you're talking about, like the evolution of this and the expansion and the growth and things like that, seem to lead naturally into kind of what came next, which is the Lansing Poet Laureate program. Can you talk about your early involvement in that program with LEAP and how you eventually decided to apply yourself?
Right. It came out of a discussion. I'd gone to the Rally of Writers. It's a wonderful one-day poetry event in Lansing, and I was sitting beside Bob Trezise, the director of the Lansing Economic Area Partnership, LEAP, and Bob is also a poet. And I was complaining about the fact that I never thought that the state of Michigan was going to establish a Michigan poet laureate. And Bob said, he said, I've always thought that Lansing should have a poet laureate. And so I said, I'll talk to Anita Skeen and Lori Hollinger at the RCA Center for Poetry and see what's possible. So we started doing research on city poet laureate projects to see how they were organized, what the goals were, what the requirements were to become poet laureates. And we wrote a proposal, had a meeting, invited the then director of the Arts Council, the RCA Center for Poetry, the Lansing Poetry Club, and LEAP, and together we founded the Poet Laureate Project. And I never imagined that I would ever be one of the laureates. That was something that didn't even occur to me until fairly recently.
So it is a 2-year term, is what I understand, and yours is coming to an end soon. Talk about that experience for you. What has that been like, and what has it meant to you to be a poet laureate? Why is it important that we have a poet laureate?
That's well, okay. I'll start with what it's meant to me. And
Yeah.
really, because I'd seen the project from the beginning, I was not romantic about it. I thought it might, it's terrible to say this, but I thought it might be a burden that, my own expectations for myself and other people's expectations might weigh on me and just sort of drain the joy out of it. And so I promised myself that that would not be true, that I would be realistic, that I would embrace the project, that I would do my best, but I wouldn't try to be super poet, that I would do my very best, but I wouldn't mess myself up with unrealistic expectations. And that's been very, very helpful. Um, it's been delightful. It's been so much fun. I've found wonderful collaborators on projects that really I'm very, very excited about. I think the work is very sound. I think people are going to love these projects. Um, I've met a lot of people. I've really been writing more and writing better than I ever have in my life. I'm very excited about poetry.
I can tell. Well, and I love that it has been raised to this level of visibility, and this it feels as though it's woven into the fabric of the community intentionally.
I think poetry is very, very important for several reasons. One, because it focuses on just absolutely critical language skills. Writing, being intentional, careful, and purposeful in your writing, and also presenting that writing orally to the public. So it's about giving voice to um, you know, the poet Carolyn Forche says that writing is the voice of the soul. And I think there's something very um, deep. There can be something very deep about poetry, although it can be playful. It can be, it has a tremendous range. What I think makes poetry interesting is it intensifies the music and language with the concepts and whatever resonance the emotions have. And so it can have, when it really works, it can have a big impact.
Well, in your role, I know you've been involved a lot with the Arts Council because
Mhm.
they have taken over the management of that program. So, what has that relationship been like for you, and what other support or collaborations have been created from that connection with the council?
It's been tremendous. They are a joy to work with. One thing is, they, the Arts Council believes that big things are possible, and that is tremendously encouraging to the laureate because it strengthens the laureate's desire and belief that the laureate can do big things, things that have an important impact and hopefully a lasting impact on the community. Um, the other thing, the Arts Council works with a variety of artists. So it sort of widens the framework of what you're thinking about. You start to think about how different art forms can come together, how poets might collaborate with musicians or visual artists. So I think that's very helpful. They've been enormously supportive. They offer a number of different kinds of grants, and they're very helpful in sort of helping you figure out the complexity of writing those grants. So it works really, really well from my point of view.
Well, your work prior to becoming poet laureate, but also definitely in your current role, reflects a really true love of Lansing. Where does that come from?
It's well, I've lived here a long time.
Hmm.
I've actually lived in Lansing and East Lansing since 1967, which is amazing to me because I intended to be here only 1 or 2 years. And I'd come from California, I'd come from out west where there's very dramatic terrain, mountains,
Hmm.
oceans, deserts, um, all of that. And I hate to say it, but I had this dreadful, sort of coastal superiority syndrome. And so I thought that the flatter parts of the United States were not interesting. And so it took me a while to realize how enormously beautiful this area is. Michigan is glorious. The Great Lakes are glorious. The other thing is, Lansing is so culturally rich. I adore how culturally rich Lansing is, how maybe because we don't, it's very easy to meet people here. It's very easy to get involved in arts organizations, in different kinds of organizations. It's a very, um, I'd say, non-pretentious community where you can be yourself, you can meet people, you can figure out what you're interested in. I also think in some ways it's sort of like a set of overlapping small towns because there's a theater community, the folk music community, the symphony, classical, all of these areas of interest overlap, but it's small enough that you can know people in many of those organizations. And um, it's part of the heartland.
It truly is. I mentioned the My Secret Lansing project in the intro. What can you tell us about that?
Well, um, long ago, the poet Dennis Heinrichsen, who was the first Lansing poet laureate, he told me he wanted to write a book of poems called My Secret Lansing that focused on little known places that he thought were really, really cool. But time went by, years went by, he didn't write that book. And I had fallen in love with the phrase. I never forgot it. And so I asked him if I could borrow it for a project. I wanted to create a writing contest called My Secret Lansing, and also to create a book out of poems and short prose pieces that. And so he said yes. I invited the second Lansing Poet Laureate, Laura April, to collaborate with me on the project. So we created a writing contest involving poetry and prose. We promoted it throughout the three-county area, and 64 writers from the Greater Lansing area contributed either short poems or short prose pieces about people, places, events that one would never know. And what I love about it is it's sort of like looking at the Lansing area through a kaleidoscope,
Hmm.
and you see one small event or one small place that you would probably never think about. Um, and so it's really a very um, fascinating way to look at your hometown because you see it through so many people's eyes. Yeah.
Well, I love that you framed it through the Tri-County area too, because, Lansing proper is one way of defining Lansing, but I think truly it is spread. I love that we've used that phrase, the Greater Lansing area, for so long because it really does feel so much more expansive and inclusive, and I think that it gives us a broader picture of that sort of tapestry that you're describing.
Right, right. Very much so. I mean, the vast agricultural area that surrounds Lansing, all of this is part of what makes this area so very beautiful and so rich.
Hmm. Well, you recently launched a poetry project that celebrates water. What can you tell us about that and what phase is it in now?
Um, it's called the We Are Water Project, the We Are Water Poetry Contest. And it's part of a bigger project called the Poetry Pathway Project. I wanted to put poems, I wanted to make poetry visible. And I was trying to think about it's hard to do it outside because weather is so powerful and can easily wear away many, many things. And so I was thinking that maybe if it could be on lectern signs, which are like lectern signs are what most historical markers are on. It's
Mm.
some sort of base with a plate at a 45-degree angle. And so I started looking at lectern signs. I saw a friend took me to see some in the tollgate drain wetlands, and I fell in love with those lectern signs. And I wanted to put poems on a series of signs along a walking path that people already used because I wanted to make sure this is a place where people would come to and people would enjoy the poetry. So I talked to Patrick Lindeman, the Ingham County Drain Commissioner, and he loved the idea. The next thing I knew, I was learning lots about Ingham County drains, how they work. I had no idea. I had
Mhm.
no idea whatsoever. Um, and it was fascinating to me. Um, Tollgate, when you go in, it looks like a small park, a nature sanctuary, a sanctuary for wildlife, but it has this very serious purpose of collecting stormwater so that the surrounding residential area doesn't flood, and then using natural substances, natural materials to remove the pollution from the stormwater and to return it to the environment instead of putting polluted water into the Red Cedar and the Grand River. And so that just really made me happy, because water is so important. And it seemed such a very elegant form of dealing with pollution, such a harmonious way of dealing with pollution. So that was interesting to me. And Pat Lindeman said, sure, poetry, we can put up signs here. So I created the contest for people in the Tri County area to write poems about water. We had a number of prompts that worked. We now have 6 winners. The names are still secret, um, but the plates for the signs are being printed as we speak, and they will be installed in early March. We will celebrate the Poetry Pathway on Sunday, March 29th, at Urban Beat. Um, the poems are beautiful. They're beautifully written. I could not be happier. The artwork is by the wonderful photographer Kim Kaufman. She's photographed Tollgate and created beautiful, almost collage backgrounds for the signs. So um, I'm thrilled. Those poems are going to be there for a while, and the signs are designed so that if we want to, in 5 years, 6 years, whatever, you can simply remove the plate and have another contest.
Mm. Well, it seems to be like the perfect cap to the end of your time as poet laureate. So, as that term is coming to an end, what's on the horizon for you next?
Well, the fellowship that I applied for and won that provided the money for the poetry pathway at Tollgate also provides money for my own work as a writer, which to me is astounding. I still don't quite believe it. Um, I would like to write a book that includes poetry, prose, and artwork about water. I mean, Michigan borders four of the five Great Lakes. The Great Lakes comprise about 20% of the world's surface fresh water. It's an enormous, unbelievably valuable, precious resource, and it would be fun to write about it.
Well, I think it's fitting that we end our conversation today with a poem. Can you tell us about the one that you'd like to share today?
Okay, I thought since I was running this contest called We Are Water, I should write a poem about water to prove to myself that I could do it. And so I wanted to write about the way in which we human beings are water. And I realized I didn't really think of myself as water, even though I know the human body is a high percentage of water. I thought of myself as a solid that had some water in it. But the more I learned about water and the more I started to understand how water functions in our body, it made me realize that we really are water, perhaps with solids in us. But anyhow, it's a true mixture, most of which is water. So this is called Body of Water. I am awash in water. My mouth is a wet cave. My flapping tongue coated with saliva. A musty damp gathers under my arms and between my toes. Tears shield my eyes. My thoughts hire messengers to navigate the canals in my brain. My heart speaks in iambic verse, embraces my body in a vast net of arteries, veins, and capillaries lying next to every cell. Did I tell you that 70% of each cell is water? That each cell is surrounded by water, water within water. I am a walking, talking body of water mixed with stardust and time.
Oh, I love that imagery. Thank you so much for sharing that. Ruelaine, where can people find you online?
I have a website. It's RuelaineStokes.com. So it's easy to find. Um, and there's also a lot about the We Are Water contest in Tollgate, and we'll be updating that as we put the signs up. We'll have pictures of the signs and the text and information about the winners.
Well, what a wonderful thing to look forward to this spring.
Very much so. Very much so. Tollgate is really a piece of paradise in
It
the
sounds
spring.
like it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Ruelaine. I really enjoyed learning more about your history.
Mm-hmm. It's been fun. Thanks. Good questions, Robin.
Thank you. Well, this podcast has been a production of the Arts Council of Greater Lansing. To learn more about them, go to lansingarts.org.